As always, it is my pleasure that you join me for today's podcast of Second Chance Coaching. My name is Dr. Richard Lewis. If you'd be so kind as to leave me a rating and your feedback, I would very much appreciate it, and it will help others like you to optimally discover this podcast wherever you listen to this and your other favorite podcast. As you know, at Second Chance Coaching, we focus on seeing everyday life through the eyes of the returning citizen and highlighting the resiliency of the human spirit. I would love to work with you one-on-one, whether you're a returning citizen or coaching client seeking your second chance, or you're a representative of a business, college, or university seeking to integrate and support returning citizens in your respective organizational and learning environments. Please feel free to contact me via email at richard@secondchancecoaching.com or via Instagram at @the_Dr.Richard_Lewis. Warning, today's podcast is discussing suicide and suicidal feelings. The language and the stories can be intense as well as triggering, so listener discretion is advised. If you or anyone you know is struggling with suicidal feelings or suicidal thoughts, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 1-800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org or call or text the 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988 or at 988lifeline.org. Welcome again to another edition of Second Chance Coaching. As always, it is my pleasure to join you on another week of your reentry journey from whichever corner of the world you're listening from. We always remain humbled and excited that you decided to spend part of your week with us. At this point of the show, I usually shout out our audience and give a quick rundown on the going-ons down here in this part of the world, but we'll save that for next week. And given the serious nature of this week's subject, I figured it was best just to really get into the subject of the week. Today, we'll talk about suicide and reentry. This past September, as has been acknowledged in the United States since 2008, was National Suicide Prevention Month, which is a time to remember the lives lost to suicide, acknowledge the millions more who've experienced suicidal thoughts, and the many individuals, families, and communities that have been impacted by suicide. It's also a time to raise awareness about suicide prevention and share messages of hope. So many of us have been affected by suicide, and those of us who've been affected by suicide, sometimes we look at it as some level of shame or something not to be discussed. But discussing it can really save someone's life. It could save the life of someone you love. I was at a conference last week in Orlando, and in one of the sessions I went to, it was on wellness and the steps to pay attention to oneself as an educator given the demands of the job. The person running the session, during the course of the session showed us a picture of her and her 98-year-old mentor. And she shared with us the pearl of wisdom that her mentor shared with her regarding the key to living a long life. And her mentor said to her, which she shared with us, the following: the key to living a long and healthy life is to love yourself so fiercely so that you can continue to love on to others. Those words really spoke to me. And what I got from it was, whether I was praying every morning, getting my walks on the beach, exercising, watching mindless TV, spending time with family, enjoying good food, and just anything I like to do, I have to fiercely be selfish in that compartmentalized space of taking care of myself so I could be useful and love on the people that mean so much to me. And as well as you do the same thing to the ones that mean so much to you. During the Q&A portion of the session, I asked a question, and in that discussion, I shared that I was a reentry coach, as well as an educator that has interacted with many students who have criminal justice histories. Upon the conclusion of that workshop, one of the participants in the workshop came up and spoke to me about some of the things that they have gone through. and even shared with me that they struggled at one time with substance abuse. And that struggle almost brought them to the brink of suicide. They did not have current suicidal thoughts, but the discussion of loving yourself fiercely touched them in a profound way. And while not in the same fashion for me, it also touched me in a very profound way. When they mentioned suicide to me, a number of things passed through my mind throughout the day. How suicide has directly affected my family, and how it's directly affected me, and how suicide profoundly affects those who are on their reentry journey. I looked up a recent study in the American Journal of Epidemiology. Hopefully I pronounced it right. But wait, hold on. As I struggle to pronounce it, you might be asking me, what is epidemiology? So I don't want to make assumptions that you know what it is, especially since I'm having trouble pronouncing it. So I'll share with you. The study of epidemiology is the branch of medical science that studies the distribution and causes of disease and health conditions in a specific population. Now, in this journal, there was a recent study that showed that formerly incarcerated people had double the rate of suicide mortality compared to the general population 3 years after their release, with the highest risk of suicide occurring within the first 2 weeks of one's release. This study really underscored the vulnerable and fragile nature that one could be in when one faces the transition of being incarcerated to being free in their community and free in this world. While most people look at being free as a desired goal, which of course it is, but the unanticipated effects of transitioning to this brand new world of living, could certainly be particularly overwhelming. This 1994, 30 years ago, was the release of the Shawshank Redemption. Any of you who's ever seen that movie, you know that there was a part of the movie where one of the inmates, Brooks, was released, and him getting used to living or trying to get used to living in a free world after being incarcerated for so long took such an effect on him that he ultimately took his life because he couldn't adjust well to living in the outside world. So whether it be that depiction in the movies or in the real life that we all live with, the transitions that could be particularly difficult is really the lack of or the difficulty in finding long-term support that particularly concentrate on comprehensive mental health, as well as all the needs that we've spoken about in the past, such as employment and housing and other social support services, such as a community of individuals who've experienced the beginnings of the reentry journey and know how to get through that hard part and provide that essential support in the immediate period upon returning home. Another study I looked at was from the state of Washington Department of Corrections, which tracked suicide mortality from 1990 to 2017. During this time period, 140,281 individuals were released from prison, and 484 subsequently died from suicide, which translates into a suicide rate of 36.3 per 100,000 person years among the previously incarcerated, compared to only 17.2 among Washington state residents who had never been in prison. Now, I've shared with all of you before that my first experience being affected by suicide was the death of my father, who committed suicide when I was 13 years old. This was particularly devastating to my immediate as well as my extended family, and as I've shared before, it certainly affected my mother for the remainder of her life. In the immediate aftermath of the funeral and all the family that were in town for that sad occasion, and everybody had gone and it was just us, my mother attempted to change the narrative and told my sister and I that my father died from natural causes. While I know my mother was probably dealing with the shock of everything, I understood what she was trying to do for us. She was really trying to maximize the healing. But what she could not take out of my mind was the phone call she made that morning in the immediate aftermath of finding my father, that she clearly stated my father died at his own hand. So for her to tell me that no, it's a mistake, it was natural causes, I understood what she was trying to do, although I didn't believe her. You know, I found, and in addition, I mean, I wasn't looking or snooping on purpose, but I did find among her papers that she had out, and as the years went on, I found my father's death certificate. And the death certificate confirmed his cause of death, that it was suicide. Now, I did not speak on extensively in that immediate time period with my mother, what it is that I saw, what it is that I knew, or the fact that I didn't believe what she was telling us, as I figured that she really needed that time. She was saying that to us, and I guess for her as well, she needed that time to decompress and heal on her own. And I spent a lot of time in particularly the first 2 years after my dad's passing. And this is me starting high school. So in addition to high school, it's always an everyday type of thing where you're trying to adjust, accept, and navigate through. And in addition to that, I'm going through all the emotions, the guilt, the anger, the sadness, all that stuff, and starting all over again, the guilt, the anger, the sadness, replaying it in my mind and replaying the scenes in my mind the last year before my dad died. That that I missed all the classic signs that my father was showing me for at least a year and a half. Like I said, that suicide was really foremost on his mind. My father went through extreme personality changes. He went from being a very much an alpha patriarchal head of the household to being very deferential to my mother, which is not something that he usually did. There were times I would come home from school and I found him crying uncontrollably at times. So much so that he didn't even recognize that I was there. And and in times in which I would speak to him, when I had one-on-one time with him, he would speak with a great deal of guilt in his voice and always want to give me lifelong lessons or instructions to follow and instructions to adhere to in case that he wasn't there one day. But by the time my mother changed the narrative again and acknowledged to us that my father did indeed die from suicide, the range of feelings and coming to terms with so much was a journey I unfortunately had to take on my own. I didn't have that opportunity to speak to my mother through those feelings. I had to really compartmentalize them myself. And my sister was still very, very young. It wasn't even, I think when my dad died, my sister wasn't even, I don't even think she was 8 or 9 yet. She was 6 or 7 probably. She was still very young. So I couldn't speak to her about it either. Now, I'm not saying my mother was not there for us because she was. My mother is the hero of this story. She really was there for us. I'm just saying that the guilt and the trauma and the aftermath of suicide can really do some funny things to you. And you got to sit there and have that grace. And I certainly have that and continue to have that for her. So let me fast forward also many years later when I was incarcerated. I didn't have suicidal thoughts, nor did I ever think of taking my own life. But being in the state of incarceration, being in a state of feeling humiliated, ashamed, and no lower than I could ever feel, the thoughts went through my mind that living is just really a kick in the teeth, and would not living be a better option? My thoughts immediately went to how 13-year-old Richard felt in the immediate aftermath of his father's suicide. Thought about me as a 13-year-old and how this was affecting everyone, how it was still affecting everyone to that very day. And then my thoughts went to Julian and Anandi. They went to my mother. They went to my sister. They went to my niece, and how much they needed me and how much I needed them. At that point, I knew that being in prayer and positive thoughts was going to be what was going to get me through this time period and my immediate stages of my reentry journey. So like I said, I didn't have suicidal thoughts, but I was like, oh, maybe dying would be better. But when I sat there and thought about the 13-year-old Richard, what he went through, when I thought about what my kids would go through, what my mother would go through, my sister, my niece, the people that I really loved, what I would be going through, that no, suicide is not an option. I got to live and I got to get through it. Now, can I tell someone or anyone who's listening right now, whether you're on your reentry journey or just living your life, what's the best way to prevent suicidal thoughts? I cannot say there's a universal method for everyone. I can't say that. But there could be things in place to optimize suicide prevention. Of course, there are, and they can include, but they're not limited to like these 6 things. Number 1, strong social support mechanisms. I can't tell you, unless they're even listening to this podcast, the amount of men and women that I met through the reentry journey, the amount of friends and the family that supported me through my reentry journey, continue to do that to this very day, that they don't even realize that I'm alive today because of them. And not alive in the sense that I've thought about taking my life, but alive in the sense of I am thriving because of them. And they don't know the impact that they had. But I need to make sure that when I see them, that they know that if they're listening to the podcast, that I'm talking about them. Number 2, what kind of means restrictions do we have on folks when they come home, as far as access to drugs or guns or weapons that could be destructive? Number 3, let's have responsible media coverage on things like suicide and having these open conversations to help and let people know that there's help out there and and the awareness and the healing that could take place. Number 4, speaking of awareness, let's say a higher awareness of identifying behaviors of possible suicide. Like I told you, I went through a lot of guilt, not recognizing, but then I remember my therapist told me that as a 12-year-old, Richard is not supposed to know those things. Easier said than done, but certainly 52-year-old Richard, certainly if he sees that or hears that in someone, I certainly could identify, or at least I hope to think I could identify those behaviors of someone that's thinking about taking their life. Number 5, let's continue to have general public education and screening. Let's continue to sit there and talk about it. Let's bring that into the light. Let people know that they're loved, that their life makes a difference, that being without you is not better than, that we need you with us. And number 6, expanded mental health counseling. I know I've said in the past that when I came home, I was just concentrating on going to work. But I think having mental health counseling and trying to unpack that trauma of being incarcerated and trying to unpack that trauma of not feeling worthy or having a lack of self-worth or whether or not this is worth it, that's important. That needs to be accessible to people, especially when they're first coming home. Now, the 6 things I just named is really just to name a few. For me, like I've told you before, and I know I'll say it as long as this podcast is around, thinking about how much my family loves me and how much I love them immediately brought me to the place in which my presence, like I said, wouldn't always be more valued and impactful than my absence. My presence would always and would be more valued and impactful than my absence. Like I said, I don't know or I can't advise anyone of a quick fix, but the beginning step can be, if you are at that place or know someone who's at that place, have them call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 1-800-273-8255. For those of you on your reentry journey, we want you here. We need you here. Your courage has already been demonstrated. You've already won the fight by getting through your incarceration. Now you have the rest of your life to live. Reach out to anyone if you need us as people. Reach out to anybody that you feel that will listen. Even if you need the help, just reach out. Even if you just think you need the help, you're not sure. Myself and so many of us who love and care about you are here to take the steps with you. And if we can, we'll try to make the burden just a little lighter for you. Once again, I want to thank all of you for always sharing your time with me. Thank you for continuing to spread Second Chance Coaching to your friends, family, and loved ones. This is a serious subject, and all the subjects we talk about are serious, but especially this one. Reach out to someone who you're not sure. They may need the help. And sometimes your reach out could mean the difference in their lives. Thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to spending time with you again next week. Thank you again for joining us here at Second Chance Coaching. In addition to coaching services for individuals and businesses, I'm also available for speaking engagements and workshops on criminal justice reentry, human resources, as well as organizational culture and leadership. Feel free to email me at richard@secondchancecoaching.com, as well as connect with me on Instagram at @DrRichardLewis. Remember, every day you are given this opportunity for your second chance, and I know you'll make the best of it. I love you all, and I look forward to connecting with you next time here at Second Chance Coaching.